I welcome you to Innovate. Yeah, this is where we innovate. This is the podcast where changes are made. If you're not growing, then you're dying. Innovation is the key to surviving. This is Innovate, where we ain't scared to make that change and create a new way. If you're ready to learn and sit back and just chill, it's about to get real. This is Innovate.
Hey, what's up, everybody? And I'm doing a live Innovate podcast. Haven't done that in quite some time, but figured I would jump on and do one. We are still posting podcasts to iTunes, Spotify, wherever your podcasts are heard, but wanted to get some on for Facebook, LinkedIn, and the YouTube crowd as well. So today I am going to go over it's the next series, essentially, if you've been following along. What we've been talking about is we've been talking about business communication, then we went into remote communication, and today we're going to go into hybrid communication. So for those of you who don't know what hybrid is, it's a mix, right? So when you think of a hybrid car, you think of something that can run gasoline and electric. So a hybrid business is something that can either be in the cloud as well as being on premise, meaning a server, or it could mean a remote workforce where you're talking about half of your employees or half of your organization has decided to return to work and they are actually physically in an office space. And the other half of your organization is remote, which is probably going to be the trend, at least starting out, until we start to see some of these organizations that have gone back try and scale down to save money and realize that they're wasting their money in office spaces, and we're going to start to see a remote flush. I was actually speaking to a couple people in the last couple weeks that work for pretty big known organizations. If I said them, you would know them. And they are actually looking to get out of the organization simply because they are being returned to work. So over the last couple of years, people have moved, lives have changed. Maybe people are living in different states, counties, who knows, right? Your life has changed. And so now you are being called back to work, and maybe you live 10, 15, 30, an hour further away from where you used to commute. Maybe you've moved to a totally different state. I actually talked to somebody the other day who moved 2 states over, and they were being called back to their other office, and they were like, I'm not doing this. There's no reason why I have to do this, and so I'm going to be looking for a new job. So we're already starting to see that, and as it affects larger organizations more, you'll start to see people pull back down. And maybe you always want to keep that core group intact, and you want to have that office structure. And who am I to tell you that you can't do that? I don't think you should, but your business is your business. So today we are going to go over the 3 tips for hybrid communications. And those hybrid communications and the way that we communicate with our employees are different. Just because somebody's in the office doesn't mean we communicate to the same way that they're remote. And just because they're remote doesn't mean we communicate to the same way that they're in the office. So there are different ways that you have to communicate. And when you bring those 2 communication platforms or ways to communicate together into one, when you're dealing with both, it's something to consider. And it is something to amend the way you manage, the way that you work with your teams, the way that you run a team, and to decide whether or not it is for you. You know, you could just say, hey, nobody works remote, or you can say, you know what, nobody comes in the office, is too difficult, but I'm here to tell you that it is possible, and you should give it a shot before you pull the cord on either all remote or everybody back to the office. So here are your 3 tips to hybrid communications. The very first one is to reduce silos, which seems like a pretty easy one, right? But it is more complicated than one might believe, at least in the beginning. So reducing silos means if your workforce, for instance, is in multiple locations, then you need to minimize the amount of closed doors meetings that you're having, or the amount of ways in which your business can communicate. So if somebody is in a remote only organization, then you might still have multiple ways to communicate. You might have email, you might have Teams, the actual Teams group, you might have Yammer, you might have Teams channels, you might have group chats, you might have one-on-one chats. That's just online. Then we talk about the office space. You might have multiple ways that you are communicating within an office space. You might have closed door meetings. You might have one-on-one. You might have phone calls. You might catch somebody in the hallway, right? So there are multiple ways that you are communicating just by simply living out your day. And so you want to eliminate closed doors meetings as much as possible when it pertains to your overall team. So if you call somebody in and you're like, hey, Bill, come in my office real quick. Sit down, let's have a discussion. You should probably open up the opportunity for that to be an online meeting for anyone who needs to join. And I say an online meeting, not a phone call. Phone bridges are not the same thing because you are going to reduce the amount of communication that you're actually delivering or receiving. Because, and I've said this on multiple podcasts, 90% of your communication is nonverbal. So if I can't see you, then a lot of the things that you're saying could be lost in translation. And so that is why I am totally against conference bridges when you're having closed door meetings. It needs to be a video call. And all of us have cameras these days. Over the past 2 years, you should have a camera. If you bring that camera back to your physical office location, set it up in your office, maybe put a monitor on the wall so other members within your office space will be able to see what it is that you're sharing or see other members. There are lots of ways that you can reduce silos of online and hybrid communication. So avoid multiple communication avenues is very, very important, and to minimize the amount of closed doors meetings that you have. So define where you communicate, whether it's online or in the office. Make things this is how we do it, right? If you leave it up to interpretation, then people are going to get it wrong because they have their own interpretation of it and they're going to do their own thing. So if you say, all right, remote workers, just let me know. Yeah, but let you know how? You want me to send you a direct message? You want me to write you a letter? Do you want me to call you? Like, what do you want me to do? So you need to lay that out in a governance, and you need to be inclusive. So make sure that if there is something that is happening that somebody else should be included on, go out of your way to include them. Remote workers, it was prior to COVID, it was remote workers were the ones who were feeling left out because we lived outside of the office space. We never really came in, so we weren't a part of some of the meetings. And so there were often times where we would, people would get brought up into a team meeting where it's like, oh yeah, we had that call, and you're like, what call? Or we had that meeting the other day in your office. Well, you didn't want to dial me in. But now it's kind of had a shift where the people who are actually going into the office, while they were minimal over the last couple of years because of social distancing and mask mandates and vaccines and all the other hurdles that we had to get over in order to get back into the office, we had a minimalist group that was actually in the office space. And so oftentimes others were calling and setting up sidebar meetings and doing things virtually that weren't including these office members, and these office members couldn't tap them. So the office members were now feeling left out. So you need to make sure that you are being inclusive to both groups, and you need to make sure that they both have equal access to information that you want them to be able to have. Otherwise, it's not fair to set people up to say, well, you're not up to date on what it is that we're doing. Well, you're not allowing them to be up to date on what it is that they're doing because the meetings aren't open or the chats aren't for everyone. So make sure that you're being inclusive with your information. That is point one, to reduce those silos of communication, silos of information. And remember, we want to make sure that we are minimizing closed doors. We want to avoid multiple streams of communication and multiple avenues of communication, and we want to make sure that we're inclusive. So reduce those silos, people. Tip number 2, build processes that work wherever. You don't want to have certain aspects of your business that are only available at the office, meaning, you have to fill out this form checklist thing that only exists in room 368 down the hall. That is not a way to do business, okay? So you need to make sure that all aspects of your business can be done wherever. That includes remote. So if you have a checklist, which I know a lot of you do have checklists, and that's totally fine to have a checklist, nothing wrong with that. But you need to make sure that that checklist is accessible online, or there's some sort of application that you can fill out in order to do that job, to make sure that that thing gets accomplished. If it's a pen and paper kind of a thing, have a checklist or a copy of that checklist online somewhere so that I can print it out at a remote location, fill it out, send it into the system wherever it needs to go. If things are only being accomplished in one location, you are bottlenecking the process and you're bottlenecking the production. So that is step one of that. The other certain aspects of that should not only be allowed to be done online. So it's the other end of the coin, right? So if there are things that you can only do online, then you are further bottlenecking your solution. So oftentimes multiple organizations will do this. They'll say, well, we're going to build an app and we're going to do this. Okay, well, what happens if the internet goes down? What happens if the site becomes corrupt? What happens if whatever software application you're using, the server crashes? There are multiple things that can go wrong, just as there are things that can go wrong in the office space. So online, you need to make sure that you are having multiple ways that you can get out of these bottlenecks as well. So make sure that you're covering your butt in both sides of the house. So the ability to work wherever doesn't mean that you can only do it online, and it doesn't mean that you can only do it in the office, right? It quite literally means you can do it wherever. You need to implement flexibility in the way that you approach problems. That is extremely important. And you need to brainstorm with your team on the different ways that you can get problems done, because at the end of the day, you as a business owner or as an organization are here to solve problems. And the more flexible you are on how you are going about solving the problems of your clients and customers, the better that your business is going to be. So flexibility is key. So that is number 2. So build processes that work wherever. And I'll go the bullet points again, where certain aspects shouldn't be available at the office only, and certain aspects shouldn't be available online only. And the third being, make sure that you have flexibility in the way that you are approaching problems that you're solving. Okay, and now the third one here is don't wing it. that might be like one that a lot of people do in the beginning, where they're like, I'm just going to wing it, right? But don't do things just for the sake of doing them. You need to have a plan. And we need to be clear on why we're doing things, and we need to be doing things for a reason. So don't just wing it. Don't just feel like you have to be doing something for the sake of doing it. Don't create, if you don't have remote people, then, don't create video conference calls and do that as extra steps. Don't just do it we're going to do it for whatever. No, have a reason for what it is that you're doing, and convey that to your team. Oh, and by the way, things change. So just because you have a governance policy put in place right now, just because you have a standard operating procedure that your business is following, doesn't mean that you have to continue to do that. Okay, but you need to be clear as to why you're making changes to that SOP and why you're making changes to what it is that you are changing. Governance is sometimes meant to change, and that's okay. But we need to get into the habit of knowing that just because something has been done the always way it's been done, just because it's, this is the way we've always done it, doesn't mean that this is the way we will do it. Okay, just because it is the way we've always done it doesn't mean it is the way we will always do it. And so we need to approach our SOPs, our governance, everything within our business, our processes, and we need to reevaluate them constantly. Now, I don't mean to reevaluate these every day. You might not even want to reevaluate them every 6 months, but on an annual basis or during major changes is very important to reevaluate your SOPs and your governance, and to reinforce why you're doing things and to make sure that these processes still make sense. Garnering feedback from your team to say, hey guys, is this still the way we're doing it? Does this still make sense? The last bullet point I have to this don't wing it or don't do things for the sake of doing them is, if something changes, redefine it and then stick to it. Okay. Whenever I write a new process map and whenever I do a new process flow, it's very important that the first time we do something, you do it exactly as it sets on that piece of paper. So if it says to go, shoulder tap somebody or email somebody or do whatever, do that thing, and then realize that it's either not important to the process, it is the wrong step of the process, whatever it is, you need to be clear, and you need to redefine and you need to stick with it. Okay. So if something changes, be clear on what has changed. You need to redefine the process, and then you need to stick to the new way of doing things, because without it, then you're just winging it. And we don't want to do that, right? So guys, thanks for hanging out. This has been 3 tips to hybrid communications. I'm going to continue doing these online like this on the video. But if you are listening to the podcast, thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing to listen. You can find them wherever your podcasts are heard: iTunes, Spotify, pretty much anywhere else, right? We're on YouTube. I'm going to continue to push these on LinkedIn as well. I'm going to try to do them during the noon hour. I'm going to do them probably about once a week. So just know that these things will be coming back your way. I appreciate you guys hanging out. Have a great weekend. And until next time, guys.